Hi everyone, welcome back to M.M.0.S.4 Stories, the channel where we explore the darker and more fascinating aspects of human history through the lens of art, true crime, and horror. I'm your host, Favela, and I'm here to share with you some chilling and intriguing stories from the past, while I create mixed media artwork inspired by them. If you're a fan of true crime, horror, history, and creativity, you've definitely come to the right place. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can join me every time I upload a new video. And if you're already subscribed, thank you so much for your loyalty and for your feedback on my previous videos. You are all awesome, and I love reading your comments. As you may know, I have a huge goal for this channel. I want to monetize it, and I want to use it as a platform for social good. I know that social media has the potential to raise awareness and to inspire positive change in the world. There are hundreds of millions of people online, and if I can reach even a fraction of them with my stories and my art, we can create a ripple effect of powerful social impact. But I can't do this alone. I need your help. I need your help to spread the word and to boost the signal across the globe. That's why I keep asking you to follow me on my social media accounts. I also post more exclusive content there. I do some pretty cool giveaways and contests. I do try to give you some value back. You can find all of the links on the screen right now or in the description box below. Right now, I'm actually hosting a giveaway on Instagram. The 100th follower will receive a free painting by yours truly, worldwide shipping included, with no strings attached. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead, follow me on Instagram, TikTok too while you're at it, and maybe you'll be the lucky winner of a unique and original artwork. While you're at that, why not also share this video with someone that you know and let them know what we're doing? Anyway, enough with the self-promotion. Let's get into the video. It's a doozy, so grab your paintbrushes, put on a pot of coffee, and get cozy. And before we dive in with 2 feet, I know I sound a little extra husky today, but I'm getting over a chest cold, so just bear with me. It's been a long week. When we think of Medusa, we usually think of a terrifying monster with snakes for hair and a gaze that would turn anyone who looked at her into stone. We think of a villain, a threat, a horror story, but this isn't the true story of Medusa. This is the story that was told by men who lived in a society which oppressed and abused women and blamed them for their own suffering. This is the story that reflects the culture of victim blaming, one of the most harmful and pervasive forms of violence against women. Victim blaming is the act of holding the victim of a crime or injustice responsible or partially responsible for what happened to them instead of the perpetrator. It is a way of rationalizing and minimizing the harm caused by the offender and shifting the blame and the guilt to the victim. It is often based on stereotypes, prejudice, myth, and misconceptions about the victim's identity, behavior, or circumstances. Victim blaming has devastating consequences for the victim. It can make them feel guilty, ashamed, worthless, and hopeless. It can make them doubt their own reality and their own feelings. It can make them lose their self-esteem and their self-confidence. It can make them isolate themselves from others and avoid seeking help. It can make them more vulnerable to further abuse and violence. Victim blaming is not a new phenomenon. It's been a theme throughout human history, affecting people from different cultures, backgrounds, and times. It's been used to justify oppression, discrimination, violence, and abuse against various groups of people, such as women, minorities, slaves, refugees, and others. One of the most notorious examples of victim blaming in history is the story of Medusa, the snake-haired Gorgon from Greek mythology. Medusa was not always a monster. She was first a beautiful and innocent maiden who served as a priestess of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare. She dedicated herself to the goddess and vowed to remain a virgin for life as a sign of devotion and purity. But her beauty also attracted the attention of another god, Poseidon, the lord of the sea and the earth shaker. He was notorious for his lustful and violent nature, and he did not care for Medusa's vows or wishes. He saw her only as an object of his desire, and he decided to take her by force. One day, he found her in Athena's temple, where she was praying and worshipping. He approached her stealthily, threw her on the sacred ground, violating both her body and her sanctity. This was an act of extreme violence and disrespect, not only against Medusa, but also against Athena. You would think that Athena would be outraged by this act of sacrilege and come to Medusa's defense, right? After all, she was her loyal servant and follower, and she'd done nothing wrong. But no, Athena didn't help her. Instead, she blamed her for what happened. She accused her of seducing Poseidon and tempting him with her beauty. She punished her by transforming her into a hideous monster, just like her sisters. Her golden hair turned into writhing snakes. Her bright eyes became bloodshot and glaring, and her radiant face became distorted and terrifying. She was also cursed with a dreadful power. Anyone who dared look directly at her would turn into stone. How cruel and unjust is that? Athena took everything away from Medusa: her dignity, her innocence, her beauty, her humanity. She made her into a pariah, an outcast, a freak. She condemned her to a life of loneliness and misery, where she would never find love or companionship. She forced her to flee from civilization and to hide in a remote island where she lived in fear and despair. And even there, she still wasn't safe. She was hunted by heroes who wanted to unalive her and claim her head as a trophy. One of them was Perseus, the son of Zeus and Danae. He was sent by King Polydectes of Seriphus to bring back Medusa's head as a gift for his wedding with Danae. Perseus did not care about Medusa's story or her plight. He saw her only as a challenge and a prize. He received help from several gods and goddesses, including Athena herself. How ironic. Who gave him a reflective shield to avoid looking at Medusa's eyes. He snuck into Medusa's lair while she was sleeping and cut off her head with his sword. Damn! Even in death, Medusa would suffer more indignities. Her blood gave birth to 2 offspring: Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the golden sword. They sprang from her severed neck and flew away from their mother's corpse. Perseus took Medusa's head and used it as a weapon against his enemies, turning them into stone with its gaze. He also gave it to Athena, how generous, who placed it on her shield as a symbol of terror. This story is not only unfair, it's dangerous and it's harmful. It's a story which perpetuates the culture of victim blaming. That is, the act of holding the victim of a crime or injustice responsible or partially responsible for what happened to them, instead of holding the perpetrator responsible. It's a story which rationalizes and minimizes the harm caused by the offender and shifts the blame and the guilt to the victim. It's a story which silences and erases the victim's voice and agency and portrays them as passive and powerless. Victim blaming is not just a myth. It's a reality that many survivors of domestic violence face every single day. Domestic violence is any form of physical, sexual, emotional, or psychological abuse which occurs within an intimate relationship. It can affect anyone, regardless of their gender, age, race, religion, or socioeconomic status. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women worldwide will have experienced physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner or non-partner in their lifetime. That means that there are millions of women who have suffered or who are suffering from domestic violence right now. But many of them don't receive the support or justice that they need and deserve. Instead, they're often blamed and shamed by their abusers, their families, their friends, their communities, and eventually, themselves. They're often asked questions like, why did you stay with him? What did you do to provoke him? What were you wearing? Why didn't you fight back? Are you sure it was abuse? These questions imply that they somehow caused or consented to the abuse, or that they could have prevented or stopped it if they had wanted to. These questions make them feel guilty, ashamed, worthless, and hopeless. But there's another way to look at their stories, one which recognizes them as survivors who resisted and who fought back against their abusers. Survivors who did not choose to be abused, but who used their skills, resources, and networks to protect themselves and their children. Survivors who didn't let their trauma define or destroy them, but who transformed it into strength and to courage. Survivors who didn't accept the fate that was imposed on them by their abusers, but who challenged their authority and their injustice. Medusa tattoos have been pretty much everywhere lately, especially on social media platforms like TikTok. This is because many survivors look at Medusa's story and see a symbol of their own struggle and survival, of their own power and dignity, their own justice, injustice, and revenge. They use tattoos of Medusa to reclaim their bodies and their stories, to fight back against stigma and shame, and to show solidarity and support for each other. They're also a popular way for survivors not only to express themselves, but to raise awareness about domestic violence. They've become a way for survivors to challenge the dominant narrative that portrays them as weak, helpless, or deserving of their abuse. Medusa tattoos are certainly more than just ink on skin. They're very loud statements of resistance, resilience, empowerment, and emancipation, healing, and hope. They're a reminder that survivors are not alone, they're not monsters, and they're not victims. They're survivors. They're Medusas. Did you know that victim blaming is actually a form of emotional abuse? It occurs when the victim of a crime or any wrongful act is held entirely or partially responsible for the harm that befell them, instead of the perpetrator. It's a way of rationalizing and minimizing the harm caused by the offender, and of shifting the blame and the guilt off to the victim. It's often based on stereotypes, prejudice, myths, and misconceptions about the victim's identity, behavior, or circumstances. Victim blaming can sound and look like many things, such as asking questions that imply that the victim could have prevented or stopped the abuse, such as, why did you stay with him? What did you do to provoke him? What were you wearing? Why didn't you fight back? Are you sure it was abuse? Or making statements that suggest that the victim deserved or invited the abuse, such as, you should have known better. You asked for it. You brought this on yourself. You must be exaggerating. Expressing doubt or disbelief about the victim's experience, such as, he's such a nice guy, he would never do that. You're just trying to get attention, or you're looking for sympathy. You're way too sensitive. You're being emotional. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Or minimizing and dismissing the impact of the abuse, such as, it's really not that bad. Could have been so much worse. It's over now. Just move on. You're lucky he didn't hurt you more. And blaming the victim for the consequences of the abuse, such as, you ruined his career and his reputation. You broke up your family. You ended your relationship. You made him lose his cool. This is your fault that he cheated on you. Victim blaming can have devastating effects on survivors of abuse. It can make them feel guilty, ashamed, worthless, and hopeless. They may blame themselves for the abuse and feel like they're bad, dirty, stupid, or weak. It makes them feel confused, isolated, and alone. They may start to doubt their own reality and their own feelings. They might lose trust in themselves and others, and they might feel like they have no one to talk to or no one who understands them. They feel angry, depressed, and anxious. They experience a range of negative emotions and mental health issues. They have low self-esteem and self-confidence and difficulty coping with stress and trauma, and they feel afraid, unsafe, and vulnerable. They live in fear of further abuse and retaliation. They may feel like they have no power or control over their lives. And they may have trouble setting boundaries and asserting their rights. Victim blaming often also prevents survivors from seeking help and justice. They may fear being blamed again by others, including their family members, friends, authorities, and professionals. They might feel like they have no evidence or any credibility to prove their evidence of abuse. They may feel like they have no options and no resources to escape or to even eventually heal from everything that's happened. Victim blaming can be especially harmful when it occurs after the survivor has separated from the abuser. This is known as post-separation abuse. Post-separation abuse can take many forms, such as economic abuse. The abuser may block access to bank accounts and credit cards, ruin the survivor's credit score, fail to pay debts or support payments, or sabotage the survivor's career. Legal abuse. The abuser may use court proceedings and false reports to harass, impoverish, or discredit the survivor. The abuser may also seek custody or visitation rights over children as a way to control or hurt the survivor. Isolation and discrediting. The abuser may spread lies and rumors about the survivor to their friends, family, coworkers, or community. The abuser may also make fake allegations of mental instability, parental alienation, or child abuse against the survivor. Abuse by proxy. The abuser may use other people to abuse the survivor on their behalf. The abuser may enlist family members, friends, or even children to intimidate, threaten, or harm the survivor. The abuser may also use institutions such as law enforcement, social services, or healthcare providers to interfere with or undermine the survivor's well-being. Post-separation abuse makes it hard for survivors to heal and to move on from their abusive relationships. It can expose them to more risk of physical violence and homicide. Therefore, it is truly important for survivors to seek help and support every step of the way. It can make survivors isolate themselves from others, and it can make them avoid seeking help at all. It makes them more vulnerable to further abuse and to further violence. However, there are some ways that victims of abuse can counteract victim blaming and reclaim their power and their dignity. Here are just a few of my suggestions. Number 1, seek professional help. A therapist, counselor, or support group can help you process your trauma, heal your wounds, and rebuild your resilience. They can also help you challenge the negative beliefs and messages that you may have internalized from the abuse and the victim blaming. They can help you recognize that you are not to blame for what happened to you, that you're not alone, and that you're worthy of respect and compassion. Number 2, practice self-care. Taking care of your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being is essential to your recovery. You can practice self-care by doing things that make you feel good, like eating well, exercising, sleeping, meditating, reading, listening to music, or engaging in your hobbies. You can also practice self-care by setting healthy boundaries with others, saying no to things that drain you or harm you, and saying yes to the things that nourish you and empower you. Number 3, connect with supportive people. Surround yourself with people who love you, understand you, and support you. These can be family members, friends, coworkers, or even other survivors. They can provide you with emotional support, practical assistance, or social interaction. They can also help you challenge the victim blaming that you may encounter from others, or even from yourself. They can help you validate your feelings, affirm your strengths, and celebrate your achievements. Number 4, educate yourself and others. Learning more about abuse and victim blaming can help you to understand what happened to you, and also process how it wasn't your fault. You can read books, articles, blogs, or listen to podcasts that address these topics. You can also pay it forward and educate others about abuse and victim blaming by sharing your story, raising awareness, or advocating for change. You can use social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter, or you can even reach out to me and I'll read your story on an episode of In Her Own Words. Spread your message, connect with other survivors. It's powerful. I know it's scary, but this one's really worth it. Number 5, seek justice and closure. Depending on your situation and your preferences, you may want to seek justice and closure for the abuse and the victim blaming that you experienced. You may want to report the abuse to the authorities, press charges against the perpetrator, or seek legal remedies for the harm that was done to you. You may also want to confront the perpetrator or the victim blamer in a safe and controlled way, such as writing a letter, making a phone call, or hiring a mediator. You may want to express your anger, your pain, or your forgiveness, depending on what feels right to you. You may also want to seek closure by letting go of the past, moving on with your life, or finding meaning in your experience. These things are up to you, and you're under no pressure to make a decision. Do what's right for you, do it safely, and move on. You deserve to move on. Victim blaming is not only harmful for survivors of abuse, but also for society as a whole. It perpetuates a culture of violence, silence, and injustice. It prevents accountability, healing, and change. Therefore, it is important for everyone to stand up against victim blaming and to support survivors of abuse. Here's a few ways you can do that. Listen and believe. When someone tells you that they've been abused or victimized, listen to them with empathy and respect. Believe what they say without questioning or doubting it. Don't ask them why they didn't do something or why they did something or what they did to cause the problem. Don't tell them what they should have done differently or what they should do now. Don't minimize or dismiss their experience or compare it to anyone else's, and don't judge them or blame them for anything. Just listen. Just believe them. Validate them and support them. After listening and believing, validate their feelings and support their choices. Tell them that their feelings are normal and understandable and that they have a right to feel them. Tell them they are not alone, that there are many others who care for them. Tell them that they're not to blame for what happened to them and that they did nothing wrong. Tell them that they are strong and brave for surviving and speaking up. Remind them that you are here for them and that you will help them in any way you can. And ask them what they need or want from you. Respect those wishes. You can educate and challenge by learning more about abuse and victim blaming and how they affect survivors and society as a general whole. Educate yourself and others around you about the facts and myths about abuse and victim blaming. Challenge the comments or behaviors that blame or shame survivors. Challenge the systems or institutions that enable or ignore abuse and victim blaming. Speak up and speak out against abuse and victim blaming and for survivors' rights and dignity. Advocate. Act. This can be as big as joining and supporting movements and organizations which work to end abuse and victim blaming and to empower and protect survivors, or as small as donating a little bit of your money, time, or resources to causes or campaigns which address these issues. You can volunteer or work with shelters, hotlines, or services which help survivors of abuse. You can participate and organize events. You can raise awareness by signing and creating petitions, letters, or statements which call for action and justice. You can vote or lobby for laws or policies that prevent abuse and victim blaming and that support survivors. These are all some small things you can do every day just to show up for the women in your life that have survived abuse. I started this channel as a way of coping and healing from the abuse that I endured from my ex-partner. He was a narcissistic and manipulative person who controlled, isolated, and harmed me in so many ways. He physically, sexually, emotionally, and financially abused me for years. He made me feel like I was worthless, crazy, and hopeless. He also threatened to unalive me if I ever left him or exposed him. In November of 2020, I finally gathered the courage and the evidence to take legal action against him. I filed an emergency protective order and a criminal complaint against him, hoping to get some much-needed protection and justice. Instead of facing the consequences of his actions like a man, he instead decided to launch a smear campaign against me. He used social media platforms to spread lies and rumors about me to his friends, family, and followers. He accused me of being mentally unstable and of cheating on him. He also posted several private photos and videos of me without my consent, violating my privacy and my dignity. He tried to ruin my reputation and my career, and to turn everyone around me against me. He also enlisted the help of his supporters, who joined him in harassing, intimidating, and threatening me both on and offline. They sent me hate-filled messages, comments, and emails, called me names, blamed me for the abuse, and told me I'd be better 6 feet under. They also tried to discredit my evidence and my testimony by questioning my credibility and my motive. They also tried to sabotage my legal case by contacting authorities and the courts with false reports or information. It felt like I was being abused and victimized all over again, just this time in public. I felt like I had no voice and absolutely no power to defend myself or to tell my side of the story. I felt like I had no support or justice from anyone with the power to truly protect me. I realized through this that I wasn't alone. I realized that there were lots of other survivors of domestic violence who'd gone through similar experiences. I realized that there were other people who also believed me, understood me, and supported me. I realized that I had a choice: to let them silence me or to let them hear me. I chose the latter. I chose to speak up and to speak out against abuse and victim blaming. I chose to share my story and my art with the world. I chose to create this channel as a platform for social good. I chose to use my voice and my power to educate, inspire, and empower others. I choose to turn my pain into purpose. This channel is more than just a hobby or a passion for me. It is a mission and a movement. It's a way of healing myself and helping others. It's a way of challenging the dominant narrative that portrays survivors as weak or helpless or deserving of their abuse. It's a way of reclaiming my body and my story as mine. This channel is also my way of advocating for other survivors of domestic violence who are still suffering or struggling in silence. It's a way of raising awareness about the realities and the impacts of abuse and victim blaming on survivors and society. It's a way of demanding change and justice for survivors and their children. It's a way of creating a culture of respect, compassion, and solidarity for survivors and their allies. This channel is my response to the abuse and the victim blaming that I experienced from my ex-partner and his supporters. This is my way of saying, you won't break me, you can't shame me, and you will not silence me. And you definitely didn't stop me. I too am a survivor. I'm a warrior. I'm a Medusa. The painting that I've been working on today is called The Wrath of Athena, and it's composed of watercolor, gouache, India and acrylic inks, mica pigment, Posca pen, and copper leaf on 9x12 inch, 140 pound, 300 GSM cold press block. It took me about 23.5 hours, and yes, it is available for purchase directly through me. Send me an email if you're interested in giving her a home. Thank you again for joining me today. I am humbled as always by the opportunity to spend some time in your presence. Remember, one day you will die. But until then, live well. Ciao for now.